Hi, everybody. Elgin here with coffee, still morning. Continuing on in our study on hearing the voice of God. Do you know that God can be speaking to you, and because of the filters that you have on, you may not even know it? Something like this happened exactly to a young man named Samuel in the Bible. Samuel was one of Israel's judges, and before we go into our study in the book of First Samuel, chapter 3, I want to give you a short background on who Samuel is. Samuel's mother, Hannah, was a woman who was married to a man named Elkanah, who couldn't have children. Not Elkanah, Hannah. Hannah was barren. She couldn't have children, and she was very upset about this and would go to the temple yearly to pray and ask the Lord about this. And she got no answer, and she was kind of upset. She was weeping in the temple bitterly and praying hard to the Lord, and she made a vow to the Lord. She told him, if you give me a child, I will lend this child back to you. I will literally give this child to you as soon as he's weaned, that he might serve you all the days of your life, all the days of his life. And the Lord honored that prayer and gave her a son, which he named Samuel. Okay? And true to her promise, when the child was weaned, presented him to Eli, the high priest, of the temple, and he was raised in the temple. Now, also around this time period, the priesthood was in turmoil. Eli was a negligent father who had two sons, Hopi, funny name, Hopi and Phineas, who were doing all kinds of scandalous things in the temple, like sleeping with women, doing the wild thing, polluting the Lord's sacrifices, just doing all kinds of things. They were literal gangsters. We'll go into that perhaps in another chapter. But so there's this turmoil with the priesthood, and the word of the Lord, as a result, the word of the Lord, was scarce because God would communicate primarily through the priests, in those days. But getting ahead of myself, so that's kind of the background. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There was not many visions. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Now that's key. The Lord called Samuel. The Lord literally spoke to Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lay down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Now that's key. Let me stop there, before I go on. In a previous video, you remember I talked about God being like a celebrity, a big celebrity. He gets to choose how he wants to communicate. Revealed that word is just so huge, because the Lord must reveal himself to us first in order for us to know him. Okay? That's big. But let's go on. A third time the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Now Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other time, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears it about it tingle." And then God goes on to tell him some things about Eli and the way his son, and his sons. That's for another study. So God calls God calls Samuel 3 times. And Samuel, because he's not accustomed to hearing God, just goes to Eli. Of course, it's got to be Eli. This is not God. This has got to be Eli because, God, he doesn't speak to people. I'm not used to hearing him. I've never heard him, and so many times, if I can make a analogy or a comparison, so many times God may be speaking to us, and because we don't anticipate that even being possible on some level, we'll attribute it to something that we know. This is not a rebuke or anything or criticism. It's just a natural thing. What's interesting about the last time that the Lord called Eli, if we notice on the first 3 times he called Samuel, he was calling him. And then the last time, the Lord came, this is verse 10, the Lord came and stood. And then he called. So before, it was just the Lord calling, "Samuel, Samuel, Samuel." But the last time, the Lord came. Physically, there was some kind of physical manifestation. I don't know what it was, but it said the Lord came and stood. It was that important that God wanted to communicate with him. And I would also have to say that Samuel, because of what Eli told him, had more now of a sense of expectation, anticipation. I'm going to do this the next time I hear my name called. I'm going to say this. There was an expectation in his heart that wasn't there. And I submit to you that if you want to hear the voice of God, you want to start hearing it clearly, you have to take off your blinders, suspend your current system of belief that's familiar, and stay in a spirit of expectation, anticipation. I'm going to hear from the Lord. The Lord is calling me. The Lord wants to meet with me. I'm expecting to hear from God. And I'm putting myself in a state of readiness. Think about it this way. Let's say that a good friend of yours is about to call you on the telephone. You're in a state of anticipation. There's a certain kind of feeling that goes on inside of you, because you're waiting for the call. Okay? You're waiting for the call. That expectation is there. And I feel that once that expectation is there in your heart, in your mind, that you will be in a position to hear from the Lord, to hear from God. The Word of God tells us that if we draw near to God, He will draw near to us. So like any relationship, you're going to have to want this.